Night had fallen over the interior of Minas Gerais like a heavy curtain. The MG 342 highway, almost forgotten on maps, snaked between silent fields and small hills covered with low vegetation. There was no lighting, only the pale glow of the moon reflected on the hoods of the cars that rarely passed by. In military police car 1735, two officers continued on yet another routine night patrol. The radio crackled with interference. The heat inside the car was stifling, even with the windows slightly open. Sergeant Almeida, 48 years old, was a man hardened by the road. 25 years of service had taught him to distrust silence, especially very calm silence. Beside him, Private Torres, fresh out of the academy, looked attentively at every movement around him, still with that spark of enthusiasm that police routine would soon take care of extinguishing. "It's strange that this part is so empty," commented Torres, trying to start a conversation. "It always has been," Almeida replied dryly, "but today it's more still than usual." Ahead, the headlights caught a vehicle in motion, an old large car with dirty beige paint and weak taillights, blinking irregularly. Almeida slowed down. "Look at that. Looks like an Opala? From the 70s? "It does, yes. Driving like that? At night on this road? Let's take a look." The siren sounded briefly. The car ahead hesitated, then slowly pulled over to the dirt shoulder. The interior lights did not turn on. The police car stopped a few meters away. Almeida grabbed the flashlight. They got out cautiously. The engine of the old car was still making noise, as if it was having difficulty breathing. The body was rusty in several places, but something about that vehicle seemed too preserved for its time, as if it had stopped in time, not aged, just stagnated. Almeida knocked lightly on the driver's side window. "Military police, can you lower the window, please?" Slowly the window went down with an almost painful creak. Inside the dark car, a lady appeared, completely white hair, tied in a tight bun, thin face with deep wrinkles. The eyes, however, were alive, but sad. She looked at Almeida, then at Torres, and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry, officers, I'm looking for my son." Torres frowned, still trying to understand the situation. Almeida leaned in a little more. "Are you alone, ma'am?" "Yes, for many years." "Can you show us your documents?" She nodded and pointed to the glove compartment. "They're in there." Almeida opened it carefully. The glove compartment gave off a smell of old paper and mold. Inside there was a leather folder, faded by time but intact. He pulled it out carefully. Upon opening it, he found dozens of newspaper clippings carefully folded, protected by plastic. The dates varied between 1995 and 2002. The headline was almost always the same. "Boy missing in Lavras. Searches continue without leads." Torres approached, looking over his partner's shoulder. "Is this real?" he whispered. Almeida did not answer. He continued leafing through the papers until he found a photo. It was a portrait of a boy of approximately 8 years old, smiling. The face, frozen in time, seemed to want to say something that the mouth did not say. The lady, still with her gaze fixed on the road ahead, spoke softly. He disappeared when he went out to play in the street. He never came back. They said he was taken, but I always felt he was close. Almeida closed the folder and straightened up. "Ma'am, what is your son's name?" "Matthias." The name came out with the same reverence as someone pronouncing a prayer. It was then that Torres found the envelope. "Sergeant, look at this." It was a letter, a white envelope, without markings, without a sender. The postmark had the date of 2 days before. 2 days. And the most disturbing thing, the handwriting on the envelope was childish, shaky, with large, crooked letters, addressed to that lady. She held the envelope in her hands, as if it were glass. She opened it carefully. Inside, a white piece of paper with a single sentence written in blue pen. "Mom, I'll be back soon. I'm close." Torres stepped back. Almeida was speechless. The lady smiled with tears in her eyes. "I told you, he's coming." The way back to the city was silent. Torres was driving. Almeida was in the back seat with the lady, who held the letter as if it were a sacred relic. She didn't say another word. She just looked out the window, as if she expected to see her son running between the poles or emerging from the darkness of the road. They arrived at the Lavras police station shortly after 10 p.m. The night watchman, a sleepy clerk named Davy, widened his eyes when he saw the three of them enter. "Good night. Can I help you?" Almeida threw the letter on the counter. Davy read it, turned pale. He took the lady's documents, read the name, Isabel Lopez de Almeida. "That name," he murmured. "It can't be." "Do you remember?" Almeida asked directly. "Of course I remember. That case, the case of the boy Mateus. It stopped the city for years. He disappeared out of nowhere. He was only 8 years old. The mother—" He looked at Isabel. "Is that you, isn't it?" She nodded. "I never stopped looking." Davy led them to the old records room. There, between metal shelves and dusty boxes, they found the folder marked with the case number 1995-08 M. Love. Inside, there were photos of the boy, police reports, a detailed timeline of the days after the disappearance. No concrete clues, no reliable witnesses, and most strangely, no explanation for the disappearance. Torres leafed through the papers in silence until he stopped on a page. "Sergeant, look at this." It was a police report dated 1999. 4 years after the disappearance, someone had anonymously called the police station saying they had seen Matthias, with the same appearance as when he disappeared, walking alone on a road near the old district of Carmo da Mata. "This was never investigated?" Almeida asked. "It was," said Davy, "but the road was deserted. No cameras, no signs. They thought it was a prank, or someone confusing him with another boy." "And now we have this," said Torres, showing the letter. "The handwriting looks like a child's. The content, the date. How?" Almeida closed the folder forcefully. "We're going to reopen this case." The next day, Delegate Batista was informed. A methodical, skeptical man with little patience for ghost stories. Upon hearing the account of the previous night, he frowned. A letter sent 2 days ago with childish handwriting from a boy who disappeared 30 years ago? And the mother alone driving a 72 Opala in the middle of the night? He leafed through the documents, then turned to Almeida. "Do you believe this?" "I believe something is wrong, very wrong, and it won't be ignored again." The delegate sighed thoughtfully. "Very well. Follow up on this. Reopen the case. Do whatever is necessary, but maintain discretion. This will attract the attention of the press if it leaks." That afternoon, Almeida and Torres returned to the road where they found Isabel. They searched the area carefully. Torres found a small metal box hidden under stones. Inside, there was a rusty children's bracelet with the name Matthias engraved. "Was this here all this time?" asked Torres, almost breathless. Almeida shook his head. "That was out of place, as if someone had put it there recently. But who?" They returned to the city and showed the object to Mrs. Isabel. Upon seeing the bracelet, she brought her hands to her mouth. "This was his. He wore it every day." She cried, and rightly so, but not even the tears prevented something more disturbing from emerging next. That night, a new envelope was left at the door of the police station. Inside, another note. Same handwriting. Same paper. "He's not alone. I'm taking care of him." No sender. No fingerprints. No traces. Almeida held the paper between his fingers. The heat of the room seemed to have disappeared. The silence was almost supernatural. Torres looked at him scared. "Sergeant, what is happening here?" Almeida did not answer, but deep down he already knew. This was just the beginning. The news of the reopening of the Matthias case spread quickly among the older residents of the city. In silence, of course, like whispers carried by the wind between neighbors on grocery store counters and park benches. At the police station, the found bracelet and the 2 notes were taken for analysis. But as expected in an inland city, resources were limited. The state laboratory in Belo Horizonte would take weeks to return any report. Meanwhile, Almeida and Torres decided to follow the few leads they had. The first stop was Carmo da Mata, the rural district where someone claimed to have seen the boy in 1999. The road there was narrow and lined with tall grass. Torres drove in silence, visibly tense. "Do you really think he's still out there?" he asked finally. "I don't know," replied Almeida, "but there's someone who wants us to believe that, and they're leaving the clues on purpose." Arriving at the district, they stopped at the only gas station still in operation. An elderly man with a hat and open shirt watched them from the porch. "Are you from the police?" he asked, spitting on the ground. "Yes, Sergeant Almeida. We're investigating an old case. Do you remember the disappearance of the boy Matthias in 1995? The man nodded slowly. "I remember. That caused quite a stir. But there was one thing that nobody talked about much, because it was crazy stuff." "What are you talking about?" "About 2 years after the boy disappeared, they started talking about a man who lived on the old road. Nobody knew where he came from. They said he was mute or just didn't like to talk. Children started saying he was calling them, with toys, sweets. One mother swore she saw her son talking to someone in the woods. When she ran to see, there was no one there." Almeida approached. "What did this man look like?" "Tall, thin, sparse beard, long hair, always wearing a hat. Some said he was a sorcerer, others that he was just a madman who had escaped from somewhere. But then he disappeared as if he had never existed." "Did anyone know his name?" "No, but the children, they called him Clay Joe." Torres wrote down the name. Almeida fixed his gaze on the old man. "Where was this house?" The man pointed to the hill behind the post. "Following the trail for about 2 kilometers. You have to go on foot. The house must have turned to dust by now, but be careful." The 2 officers climbed the trail in the late afternoon. The forest was dense, and the sound of branches snapping underfoot seemed louder than normal. After half an hour of climbing, they reached a clearing. There, among roots and stones, were the remains of an old cabin, rotten wood, broken tiles, and, curiously, a rocking chair still intact under a dry branch. "This is very recent," said Almeida, observing a mark on the ground, small footprints from someone barefoot. Torres moved away a little, searching the area around. That's when he saw it. A rusty toy box, hidden among bushes. Inside, old plastic cars, a headless doll, a wooden top. In the background, a battered teddy bear with the name Matthias embroidered on the chest. "Sergeant!" called Torres, breathless. "Look at this." Almeida carefully picked up the bear in his hands. When squeezing the cloth body, a weak and distorted sound came from inside the toy. "Mom, wait for me." Both froze. At the same time, the sky darkened as if it had been covered by a sheet. A strong wind blew through the clearing. A sweet, strange smell invaded the air. Torres swallowed hard. "Do you think there's someone still here?" "No." Almeida looked around. But there was. Recently. Before they returned, Torres found one more thing, nailed to a dry branch, a laminated envelope. Inside, another note. He remembers what they did. He's waiting. No signature, same paper, same childish handwriting. That night, back at the police station, while analyzing the evidence, David rushed into the room. "They just called from Donna Isabel's house." "What happened?" asked Almeida. "Someone left this at the gate." It was a cassette tape, without a label, without identification. Almeida looked at Torres. They turned on an old recorder from the police station and pressed play. Noise, static. Then a voice, weak, childish. "Is anyone there? Mum? It's dark here." And then silence. The cassette tape continued to spin, but only produced the muffled sound of the tape turning. Almeida turned off the recorder. In the police station room, the silence was almost solid. "It's a child's voice," said Torres quietly. "And it's not just any child," Almeida replied. "It's Matthias." Davi, who until then had remained apart, approached with a folder in his hands. "There's something you need to see. It's from the time of the disappearance." He opened the folder and showed an occurrence made a few days after Matthias's disappearance. It was an anonymous complaint, filed without investigation. The complainant claimed to have seen the child entering of his own free will, a black car with dark windows parked near the municipal school. The description of the vehicle matched a model that, at the time, belonged to none other than the then mayor of the city, Errico Gouveia. "This was never investigated?" asked Almeida, indignant. Never. The mayor claimed that the car was with the driver that day and had witnesses saying he was in Belo Horizonte. They filed it as a popular hallucination. He was powerful and very respected. And where is this man now? He died in 2007, car accident, but his son still lives here. Murilo Gouveia, businessman, owner of half the city. Almeida closed the folder slowly. Let's talk to Murilo. The next day, the pair went to the Gouveia mansion, a property surrounded by high walls and security cameras. Torres looked around, uncomfortable. Will he receive us? He will. They always receive when they know they are being watched. Murilo Gouveia, 38 years old, met them in the main room of the house. He wore an impeccable white shirt, a luxury watch, and an educated, but cold, smile. How can I help you, officers? Almeida didn't waste time. Do you know why we're here? I imagine it's because of the stir about the Matthias case. Yes, I saw something on social media. A lady who never gave up on her son. Admirable, really. Your father's car was mentioned in an old complaint. They claimed to have seen Matthias getting into it on the day he disappeared. Murilo laughed briefly, with a touch of contempt. With all due respect, Sergeant, these stories have been debunked for decades. My father was out of town. There were witnesses. If it were true, he would have been arrested, don't you think? Maybe. Or maybe he was protected. Murilo's smile vanished for a moment. His eyes narrowed. Do you have proof of that? Not yet, but it's starting to appear, including recordings. Murilo leaned back in his chair. Very well, I hope you find what you're looking for. Just don't expect my collaboration with conspiracy theories based on old tapes and the ravings of a lonely woman. Almeida stood up. Sometimes, Mr. Gouveia, the ravings of others are what reveal our truths. As they left, Torres commented. He was nervous. More than he wanted to show, but we'll find out how far this goes. That night, Isabel received a new letter. This time, it wasn't just a note. It was a drawing, made with colored pencils on school paper. It depicted a cabin on a hill with a child in the window. In the sky, a helicopter. On the ground, two men in uniforms, police officers clearly. And next to the cabin, drawn with stronger lines, a tall man with a hat covering his face. On the back of the paper, just one sentence, "You're getting close." The city began to react. Murmurs increased. A retired teacher anonymously called the police station, saying that in 1995, Matthias had told the class that a man in a black car wanted to take him to see toys. She alerted the school administration, but no one wanted to get involved. A few days later, Matthias disappeared. Other reports began to surface. A woman claimed to have found children's clothes buried on her rural property almost 15 years ago, but was discouraged from reporting it. A former City Hall driver said that he took the black car in secret to isolated areas a few times, but never knew who got in or out. The city, dormant for decades, now seemed to wake up haunted. And then, something even more disturbing happened. The state expert called. The notes and the analyzed letter had recent DNA. What are you telling me? Almeida asked on the phone. The handwriting is childish, but the saliva used to seal the envelope is from a child. And even stranger, we found partial genetic correspondence with Mrs. Isabel. Almeida froze. Are you telling me that? The boy Matthias may be alive. Somewhere. And someone is helping to keep it a secret. On the same day, the police station received a package, inside an old camcorder, without a charger, but with a mini DV tape still inside. Almeida provided a device to play it, grainy image, crackling sound. The image shows a room with wooden walls. A child is sitting in the corner wearing simple clothes. He plays with a spinning top, unaware that he is being filmed. At one point he looks directly at the camera and smiles. It's Matthias. The video ends abruptly with a metallic noise and a shadow crossing the screen. Almeida and Torres were in shock after seeing the video. The clear image of Matthias, with his childish smile and distant look, left no doubt. The boy was alive. But most frightening of all was the location, an isolated room in some unknown place. And the shadow that appeared at the end? What or who was there? The feeling that something sinister was behind those images became stronger with each second. "How is this possible?" Torres murmured, still trying to process what he had seen. "This is more than a lost child," Almeida replied, his voice grave. "Something much older and darker is involved here." The tape was taken to the expert, and the analysis revealed something even more disturbing: the date of the video. The file was created just over 2 years ago. This meant that, for all this time, Matthias had been alive, and someone was keeping him captive. With this new clue, the search intensified. Isabel, desperate, now firmly believed that her son was somewhere in the mountains surrounding the city. She insisted that he was still waiting for her, that the letter, the notes, and the signs were messages from Matthias trying to communicate with her. But the truth was that no one else knew who to trust anymore. The next day, the team of police officers climbed the hills behind the cabin they had found. The trail was steeper than they imagined. The vegetation, thick and suffocating, almost seemed to want to swallow everything around. The sun was low, and the golden light illuminated the darkest corners of the forest, creating mysterious shadows. When they reached the clearing where the cabin was still partially standing, something seemed wrong. The place was different. The marks on the ground, once fresh, now seemed deeper, more recent. "I don't like this, Sergeant," said Torres, with a chill down his spine. "This doesn't feel natural," Almeida agreed, looking around. What once seemed like an abandoned house now had clear signs of recent activity. They entered cautiously. Inside the cabin, the smell of mold and decay was strong, but something else was there, something that didn't belong in an old house. In one corner, a circle of candles was arranged on the floor. They were extinguished, but the space around them seemed to have been cleaned recently. Almeida approached. In the center of the circle, something that caused a chill down his spine. A black stone with strange symbols engraved on its surface. It was not a common stone. It seemed to have been carefully sculpted. "What the hell is that?" Torres whispered, his voice trembling. Almeida did not respond immediately. He knew these symbols were familiar, but he couldn't identify where from. He crouched down and touched the stone, feeling a strange, icy energy. Before he could withdraw his hand, a voice whispered behind him, "He's coming." The 2 police officers turned quickly, but there was no one. Only the sound of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the wind that seemed to carry the echo of a distant voice. Almeida looked at Torres, who was pale as a ghost. "Let's get out of here, now." They returned to the city, but the images of the cabin, the stone, and the candles remained in Almeida's mind. Something much bigger was at stake, and Matthias was not the only one being kept secret. That night, while the city seemed to sleep in a disturbing silence, Isabel had a nightmare. She saw Matthias. He was in a dark room, his face covered by a shadow. He called her, but his voice seemed distant, muffled. He was saying something, but the words were lost in the wind. When she tried to reach him, the shadow moved and the child disappeared, leaving behind only the echo of a strange and guttural laugh. She woke up with her heart racing, breathing heavily. But then she heard a sound coming from outside. At her doorstep there was a box. Inside, a photo. It was of Matthias, but very different. The child in the photo was not smiling, as in the other images. He was pale, with wide eyes, and in the background, a shadow was moving, lurking. On the back of the photo, the same sentence was written, "I'm waiting," in the place where it all began. Isabel knew what that referred to. The next morning, she went to Almeida and Torres, desperate. Together, they decided to investigate more deeply the old abandoned psychiatric hospital, located on the outskirts of the city, known as the São Lucas Hospice. Many believed that the place was condemned, but little was known about what had happened there. They arrived at the hospital at dusk, when the afternoon light seemed to dissolve into the fog. The structure was deteriorated, the windows broken, and the surrounding land, covered with tall grass, gave a feeling of desolation. Upon entering, the smell of mold and decomposition was almost unbearable. The faint light of day illuminated empty corridors and rusty doors. That's when they found the file. Inside a locked room in a small archive, there were old records about a group of children who had been admitted to the hospital in the late 80s after a series of strange events in the city. Many of these children disappeared mysteriously. Almeida looked at the medical records one by one, and then he found the name that terrified him, Mateus Gouveia. The boy's name was registered in the psychiatric hospital as part of a child behavior experiment. And even worse, Érico Gouveia's name was listed as responsible for the treatment. Almeida's mind exploded with the revelation. Mateus, the missing boy, was Érico Gouveia's son. He had not only disappeared, he had been involved in something much bigger, something that was being hidden by the entire city. The city was on the verge of discovering a truth that no one could have imagined. The discovery at the old psychiatric hospital shook the foundation of everything the police believed they knew about the Matthias case. The name of Érico Gouveia, the deceased father of the powerful businessman Murilo Gouveia, was registered at the hospital as responsible for a series of experiments with children. But what did that mean? And how did Mateus fit into this macabre plot? Almeida felt a growing weight on his shoulders, as if he were about to unearth something that could destroy not only the city, but the very foundations of the society that held it up. Almeida, Torres, and Isabel met once again, now with a clearer purpose. The file found in the hospice indicated that Matthias was not the only child involved in experiments. There were other names, other records, and one of them caught Isabel's attention, a girl named Anna Carolina, who had disappeared at the same time as Matthias. "This girl? Anna Carolina," Isabel murmured, her face pale. She was Matthias's friend. They were inseparable at school. "It's not possible. They were together." Almeida frowned. "And why does her name appear here, along with Matthias's?" Isabel was thoughtful for a moment. I don't know, but I know that Anna Carolina's mother never gave up looking for her. She died trying to find a clue." Torres approached, taking notes. He knew that every word that came out of Isabel's mouth was fitting into the puzzle in an increasingly horrible way. They needed to know more about this connection. "Let's investigate Anna Carolina too," Almeida said firmly. "We need answers, and we need to find the location where these experiments happened." With a new direction, the three went to Anna Carolina's house. It was a small, simple house, still maintained by the girl's relatives. At the place, an elderly woman answered them with tired eyes and a sad face. "Anna Carolina," the woman said, her voice hoarse. "I never stopped looking for her, not for a minute." Almeida tactfully questioned the woman. "Ma'am, do you have any idea where Anna Carolina could have gone? Or something that could help us find answers?" The woman led them to her granddaughter's room, which had been left virtually untouched since the disappearance. Among toys, books, and old photographs, there was a box hidden under the bed. Inside the box, a photo album. In the middle, a photo of Anna Carolina and Matthias together, smiling, a clear and innocent image of childhood. But upon turning the next page, what Almeida found was a drawing. A drawing of a cabin with two small figures in front, both with smiling faces, but with strange and disproportionate eyes, as if they were being watched by something bigger. Behind them, a shadow seemed to stretch out, almost as if it were alive. "What is this?" Almeida asked, feeling a chill run down his spine. The woman looked at the drawing and sighed, her voice trembling. Anna Carolina made this drawing a few days before disappearing. She was obsessed with a place, a cabin in the mountains. She talked about it, but no one believed her. Almeida exchanged a look with Torres. They were on the right track. The cabin in the mountains was not just a refuge or a simple house. It was something much more sinister. "This is what's leading us there," Almeida said firmly. "Let's go back to the mountains. We need to find out what's happening in these places." The next morning dawned grey, with a thick fog covering the hills. Almeida, Torres, and Isabel set off for the mountains again. This time, they were not alone. They knew that what they were looking for was beyond reason, something that should not be found. But the truth, however painful, needed to be unearthed. The trail that would lead to the cabin now looked different. The silence was absolute, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Each step seemed heavier than the previous one, and the feeling of being watched only increased. When they reached the clearing, the cabin was there, but something had changed. It was no longer in ruins. The wood looked new, the candles burning as if the place was in use, and on one wall the same symbols that Almeida had seen the first time he was there, now clearer, as if they were alive. Before they could enter, a soft voice, almost a whisper, cut through the air. "You shouldn't be here." The three turned quickly, but there was no one. Only the fog, thick and impenetrable. However, the voice persisted. "He won't let you leave." The tension increased, and with no other choice, they entered the cabin. Inside, what they saw froze them in place. There was a table in the center of the room, and on top of it, a series of bottles with colored liquids and various unknown artifacts. On one of the walls, more drawings of children with wide eyes, similar to those of Anna Carolina and Matthias. And then, at the back of the room, there was a figure, standing still and motionless. It was a shadow, shaped like a man, but its face was indistinguishable, covered by a hood. It looked at them without saying a word, and at that moment, the candles around the room lit up all at once, illuminating the space in a supernatural way. "He's waiting," said the figure, with a voice that seemed to echo in the air. Almeida, Torres, and Isabel exchanged glances, fear growing in their hearts. The mystery of Matthias, the experiments, the entire city, was involved in something much deeper than they imagined. And now it was too late to turn back. The figure spoke again, this time with a low, macabre laugh. "There's no way to escape anymore, my friends. You've already been chosen. Now, become part of our game." The air inside the cabin was heavy. The figure at the back of the room remained silent, but its presence seemed to dominate the space. The tension was palpable, as if the walls were about to collapse at any moment. With each breath, the sound of lit candles and the rustling of the mist outside filled the void. Isabel, still tense, held Almeida's hand tightly. Torres, with his revolver in hand, was prepared for anything. But something in the atmosphere of that cabin made them question whether they were ready for what was about to happen. The hooded figure took a step forward, its presence undeniably threatening. And then, with a grave voice that seemed to come from somewhere beyond time and space, it spoke. "You've gone further than anyone has ever dared, but you haven't fully understood the truth. The game has always been bigger than you can imagine." Almeida, without hesitation, replied firmly, "What do you want from us? What happened to the children? Where is Matthias?" The figure let out a low laugh, almost as if it were amused by the naivety of the question. With a slow movement, it moved away from the wall, revealing something that no one expected, a huge photograph pinned to the wall with rusty pins. The image showed a large gathering, a circle of people, all in formal attire and smiling, with a man at the front. It was Errico Gouveia, the city's late mayor. Next to him there was a child, Matthias. He didn't seem to be older than 6. Isabel approached the image, her hands trembling. "This can't be true," she whispered. "He was with my son that day." The figure continued to speak, its voice now calmer, almost like an explanation. Matthias was part of something much bigger. The Gouveia's project wasn't just about politics or power. It was an experiment to connect the souls of children with something beyond, something that transcends time, space, and death. He was destined to become part of it from the beginning. Torres frowned, trying to understand the figure's words. "What are you saying? This is crazy. What are you talking about? Magic? Witchcraft?" The figure looked at Torres with an enigmatic smile. "It's not magic. It's science. The science of souls. The power to control people's destiny, to cross the barriers of time and death. The Gouveia discovered the key to all of this, and Matthias was one of the first to be connected. He was kept trapped in this limbo, waiting to be used." Almeida, perplexed, took a step forward. "What do you mean by connected? How so?" The figure made a sweeping gesture, pointing to what appeared to be an old machine covered by cloths in the corner of the cabin. With a quick movement, it revealed the object. It was a kind of large mechanical device, with intertwined tubes and wires that seemed to be connected directly to the wall of the cabin. "This is the key, the device created by the Gouveia, a means of transmitting a child's life energy to another plane. The process was interrupted in 1995 when Matthias disappeared, but he didn't die. He was transported, trapped between two worlds. Isabel screamed. But what about Anna Carolina? She was also involved in this. The figure looked at Isabel with an enigmatic, almost sorrowful look. Yes, Anna Carolina was one of the other connected ones, but she wasn't chosen to be the recipient of the energy. Matthias knew was different. He was the first to be selected for the final experiment. Isabel fell to her knees, the pain of knowing the truth destroying her from within. Tears ran down her face as she tried to process everything she had just heard. "No, it's not possible," she cried desperately. I can't lose my son. He's still alive, isn't he?" The figure paused, the shadow of a smile appearing under the hood that covered its face. "He's still alive, yes. But he's no longer the Matthias you knew. He is something beyond, something that transcends the human body." Almeida didn't know if he could believe those words. Everything seemed like madness, a horror story that had no basis in reality. But the evidence was there in front of him, and more importantly, he knew that if Matthias was still alive, there was a chance to bring him back. "Where is he?" Almeida asked, his voice tense. "How can we bring him back?" The figure seemed to hesitate, as if it were weighing its answer. "To bring him back, you'll need to break the circle, free the child, and destroy the bond between the worlds. But that won't be easy. The power you are facing goes beyond anything you know. The price will be high." Almeida knew that this meant more than he was willing to pay. But he had no choice. He looked at Isabel, who, despite the pain, was determined. They had to try. "We'll do whatever it takes," he said firmly. "Where is the device? What do we need to do?" The figure looked at them, and for the first time the hood seemed to move slightly, as if the person behind it was really watching them. There was something there, something that made the atmosphere around them tighten. "The device is connected to a portal, which is located in the depths of the abandoned mine north of the city. The key to opening this portal is the energy of the connected souls. Matthias still possesses a part of his human essence, but the portal will require more blood." Isabel looked at the figure, her eyes filled with tears. "What are you saying? It requires blood." "No, we're not going to do that." The figure made a gesture, and the environment around them began to shake. The walls of the cabin seemed to give way under an invisible pressure. "Time is running out. If you don't act now, Matthias will be trapped forever, and the whole city will be consumed by what he has become." Almeida looked at the door of the cabin, which was now open, revealing the darkness outside. They had a difficult choice to make: face the unknown in the depths of the mine and try to save Matthias, or let him remain lost forever, condemned to live between two worlds as a prisoner of his own destiny. With a determined look, Almeida turned to Isabel and Torres. "We're going to save Matthias, we're going to the mine, and we're going to finish what we started." The night was darker than usual, with heavy clouds obscuring the stars and the moon. The mist that had previously hovered over the mountains now engulfed the city, creating a desolate scene. The wind cut through the landscape hauntingly, as if nature itself was turning away from something that should not be touched. Isabel, Almeida, and Torres walked in silence, their hearts racing as they climbed the steep path towards the abandoned mine. The atmosphere around them seemed to close in, as if the city was breathing, waiting for the moment to exhale. The mine was located at the top of the mountain, far from the eyes of the population, hidden for decades. The entrance, practically forgotten, was a dark crack in the rock, surrounded by twisted trees that seemed to stretch out to touch the sky. It was impossible to believe that anyone still ventured there, but their mission was clear. They had to reach the portal, destroy the bond, and free Matthias, or perhaps condemn the city to a fate worse than anything they had ever imagined. "We're close," said Almeida, his voice hoarse in the stillness of the night. Isabel, walking beside him, looked at him with an expression of despair mixed with determination. She knew that what they were about to do was not just a matter of saving her son. It was a matter of salvation for everyone, or perhaps destruction. "Matthias?" Isabel whispered, as if trying to call his name would bring some answer. "Are you listening?" The only answer was the sound of their boots hitting the stones and the wind passing through the trees. When they reached the entrance to the mine, the darkness was total. There was no light, just the oppressive feeling of entering a place where time seemed not to exist. The only light came from the lanterns they carried, but they seemed weak, almost as if the air itself was sucking up the luminosity. "We have to go in. We have no time to lose," said Torres, looking into the darkness of the mine. They entered, one step at a time. The walls of the mine were damp and slippery, and the sound of their footsteps echoed with a reverberation that made them feel as if they were being followed. The feeling of being watched increased with each step, as if something was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The mine extended into the interior of the mountain, and soon they began to realize that it was not just an ordinary mine. The corridors seemed to have been deliberately worked on, with strange and ancient symbols carved into the stones. The sinuous lines in the drawings formed patterns that repeated themselves, as if they were trying to tell a long-forgotten story. There was something familiar but at the same time terrifying in these drawings, something that seemed to connect with the events of the city, with the disappearances and the fate of the children. "What are these symbols?" Torres asked, stopping to examine the walls. Isabel, with a tense look, looked at him and said, "I've seen these symbols before in the cabin. They're the same ones that were around the table where the device was. They are part of the ritual." Almeida, who already knew the danger he was facing, gestured for them to continue. "We can't stop now. We're getting closer." The mine narrowed as they advanced, until finally they reached a large underground cave. The air was denser, and the sound of dripping water was muffled. In the center of the cave, there was a metal structure that seemed completely out of place, as if it were a modern construction in the middle of the rock. It was the device, the portal. The metal chains were wrapped by tubes that extended to the wall, where the symbols, now shining with a faint pulsating light, were engraved. The hooded figure had told the truth. There in the heart of the mine was the portal. But what else awaited them? Isabel approached, her eyes fixed on the machine. She felt something inside her, a strange force that pulled her towards the device, as if something was calling out to her. The light from the lanterns could not completely penetrate the darkness around the cave, and the feeling that they were about to break through a barrier between worlds increased with each second. "What do we need to do now?" asked Torres, looking at Almeida. Almeida analyzed the structure carefully, his eyes quickly moving between the details of the device. "The key to opening the portal," he said thoughtfully, "is the energy of the children. They were chosen to be connected to this place. Matthias, he was part of it. And now he is the connecting point." Isabel looked at him, desperate. "No, it's not possible. He can't be a key to something so terrible." Almeida, with a somber look, replied, "Oh, we have no choice, Isabel. We have to destroy the bond between the worlds before it's too late. If he stays here, what's on the other side will break free, and that will be the end of us all." Without further words, Isabel approached the device, her hands trembling as she touched the metal chains. Something stirred in the shadows in the background, a cold and heavy presence, but Isabel could not hesitate. Matthias's fate was there, waiting. Suddenly, a strange sound, like a distant sigh, echoed through the cave. Torres and Almeida looked around but saw nothing. Then the sound increased, turning into a hum, something that made the stones tremble. The wall in front of them began to open slowly, as if an invisible door was being unlocked. And behind the door something was approaching, a shadow that stretched and distorted, as if it were alive. The portal was opening. What was on the other side was breaking free. Before they could react, an invisible force pushed them back, throwing them to the ground. The hum was now deafening, and the light around them began to distort, becoming a hellish vision of shadows and distorted reflections. And then, in the center of the cave, a figure emerged. It was not Matthias, but something he had become. His body was pale and disproportionate, with completely black eyes without shine fixed on Isabel. "Mom." Matthias's voice sounded, but it was no longer the same. It was distorted, distant, as if he was speaking from another place. I'm trapped here. They kept me here." Isabel didn't know what to do. The boy in front of her was her son, but at the same time he wasn't. The pain of seeing him like this, distorted and lost, consumed her from within. "Matthias," she cried, reaching out her hands towards him. "I came to save you. Let's get out of here. You don't belong in this place." But as she spoke, the shadows around them began to move, and in the back of the cave, an even more powerful presence seemed to manifest itself, like an ancient and immense force which had been awakened. The last act of resistance was about to begin. The battle between light and darkness, between what was human and what was beyond, began at that moment. The buzzing intensified, reverberating off the mine walls like a warning cry, echoing into the depths of the earth. The shadows around the cavern were moving as if they had a life of their own, distorted and fluid, forming indistinct figures that danced with terrifying speed. In the center of the room, Matthias, or what was left of him, stood with black empty eyes fixed on Isabel. He no longer seemed to be the 6-year-old boy she had known. His body was marked, stretched unnaturally, as if his human essence was being swallowed by something much larger, much older. Isabel, with tears in her eyes, reached out her hands, trying to reach her son, but he recoiled, as if trapped between two worlds. "Mom." Matthias's voice sounded once more, but now there was no human warmth in it. It was cold, distant, as if speaking through an invisible curtain of pain. "They kept me here. I can't leave. What I am now does not belong in this place. But you need to understand, Mum. I was chosen." Matthias's words resonated in the depths of Isabel's soul. She felt his pain, the anguish and weariness of someone trapped, awaiting a freedom that seemed impossible. But what he was saying made her question everything she knew up until that moment. Matthias was more than just lost. He had been altered, shaped by forces beyond human comprehension. "No!" Isabel shouted, her eyes fixed on Matthias while her hands trembled. "You can't be this. I'm going to bring you back. I love you, son." Almeida, who had remained silent until then, understood what was at stake. Matthias's words confirmed what he feared. The boy was indeed bound to something greater, something the Gouveia had created, something beyond human understanding. But he couldn't let Isabel give in. They couldn't allow themselves to fall into that trap. "Isabel, no!" Almeida shouted, running towards her. "He's not the Matthias you know anymore. We can't save someone who is no longer here." Those words cut through the air. Isabel looked at him, desperate, her eyes filling with tears. "No!" Isabel screamed, pulling away from Almeida. "I won't lose him. I won't abandon my son." The cavern began to tremble violently, as if the very ground was trying to give way. The portal was expanding, its light increasing every second. The symbols on the walls pulsed, illuminating the cavern with a supernatural energy. And then a guttural voice echoed, coming from the depths of the portal. It wasn't Matthias. It was something older, deeper. "You are so close to understanding. But it's too late now. He no longer belongs to you." The voice reverberated, making the stones around tremble. "You cannot save what has already been consumed. He is with us now. He is ours." Reality seemed to disintegrate around them. The cavern was distorting, and shadows began to take human forms, figures that moved at high speed, projecting themselves in their direction. Torres, who had remained silent until then, drew his weapon, pointing it at the shadows, but knew it wouldn't be enough. He looked at Almeida. "We can't face this with weapons. What we need is to destroy the portal," Torres said urgently. "If we close the portal, we can end this." Almeida quickly agreed. They had no time to lose. The fate of the city and of Matthias depended on their actions now. The figure of Matthias, or what was left of him, seemed to writhe, as if struggling to break free from what held him prisoner to the portal. His eyes, now completely black, gleamed with a cold light. "I am not who you know anymore. I'm no longer human." Matthias spoke, his voice distorted. "I am beyond everything." Isabel, with her eyes fixed on him, felt a growing weight in her chest. She wanted to believe that her son was still there, somewhere deep inside. But the truth, as painful as it was before her. "I know you're still in there, Matthias. I'm going to bring you back," she shouted as she ran towards her son. But when she got close, the invisible force emanating from the portal threw her back, knocking her to the ground. The shadow behind Matthias, a macabre and immense figure, slowly emerged from the portal. It was a shapeless entity, like a floating spectre, its presence overwhelming. It had no face, no human body, just a nebulous mass of darkness, with an energy that seemed to suck them in. "This won't end well for you." The entity spoke, its voice like an icy sigh. "Matthias is gone. Now, he is ours, and soon, you all will be too." Almeida knew they couldn't wait any longer. Matthias's fate was being decided at that instant, and if they didn't do something immediately, the entity would take complete form. The entire city would be consumed by darkness. "Let's close this portal now," Almeida shouted. He approached the central device, his hands trembling with tension. The metal chains were pulsing with a dark energy, as if they were alive. He searched desperately for something that could turn off the device, a lever, a button, anything that could interrupt the flow of energy. That's when he saw an inscription carved into one of the walls of the portal. It was a symbol, the same one Matthias had drawn before disappearing, the same one Isabel had seen on the box with Anna Carolina's photos. It was the key. Isabel, realizing what was happening, ran to the symbol. Her hands trembled as she touched the drawing, and immediately a strange glow spread across the mine walls. The structure of the portal began to shine intensely, and a wave of energy spread through the cavern. The shadows began to scream, writhing and disappearing in the light. The entity, now visible in the form of a huge shadow with hundreds of eyes, screamed in fury. But it was too late. The symbol was being activated. "No, you can't do this." The entity's voice echoed everywhere. With a last effort, Isabel pressed the symbol. The portal began to collapse and the entire cavern trembled violently. The light from the device went out and the shadows disappeared as if they had never existed. The cavern calmed down, but the silence was heavy. Isabel fell to her knees, her eyes fixed on Matthias, who was now standing, his human form restored, but weak. He looked at her with his eyes still darkened, but something had changed. He was there again on some level back. "Mom?" Matthias's voice was soft. "I'm back. I came back to you." Isabel ran to him, wrapped him in her arms and cried. But this time, her tears were of relief. The city was still safe. But the cost of this victory had been great. The truth about the Gouveas, the portal and the experiments would never be forgotten. The shadow of what happened would remain, but at least Matthias had returned. The mine was in absolute silence. The struggle to close the portal had left a heavy echo in the air, and the city outside, still far from understanding what had happened, seemed to rest temporarily, unaware of the threat that had almost consumed them. The cavern, now devoid of the shadows that had invaded it, was finally quiet, as if it were burying the horrors that had unfolded there. Isabel, with Matthias still in her arms, felt a deep weight in her heart. Her son, the boy she had lost and who was now returning from something far beyond death, was there, alive, but different. There was something in his eyes, a depth that she did not fully understand, as if, upon returning, he had brought with him a part of the darkness. The battle was won, but the truth could not be erased so easily. "Matthias," Isabel said, her voice broken but full of hope, "are you okay?" The boy looked at her with a tired expression, still with eyes full of a dark mystery, as if something had changed forever inside him. "I don't know, Mom," Matthias replied, his voice hoarse and empty, as if he were trying to understand what had really happened to him. "I don't know what I am anymore now. I feel the weight of what I saw there. What was beyond the portal." Isabel squeezed her son even tighter against her chest, feeling her heart beat erratically. She knew that the battle would not be easy, but at that moment the only thing that mattered was the fact that he was back. Her love would still be enough to heal him, to help restore what had been taken from him, she thought. Almeida and Torres approached, observing the moment with respectful silence. They knew that the worst was over, but a tension still hung in the air. The city was not yet aware of the threat that was to come, and the damage, although not immediately visible, would extend far beyond what anyone could imagine. "Isabel," Almeida said, his voice grave, as if carefully considering his words, "we don't know what will become of Matthias now. Something in that portal was beyond any human understanding. He may have returned, But what was left behind is still here with him. Isabel looked at Almeida with fixed eyes, but there was something in her gaze that showed more faith than doubt. She knew that the battle had not simply been against the entity on the other side, but against the unknown itself, against what they were willing to do to protect those they loved. "I'm going to take care of him. He will find a way." The confidence in her voice was unwavering, but inside herself she knew that the journey would be long and painful. Matthias's return did not mean the end of the darkness, but perhaps a new chance. She had to believe in that. Torres looked at them with a thoughtful expression, as if he knew that the city needed to be kept out of the eyes of the great mystery that had almost destroyed them. "We cannot allow what happened here to spread," Torres said firmly, looking at the others. "The city needs to believe that everything is back to normal. We cannot allow the truth to be known. We cannot let the terror of what happened here be spread." Isabel nodded, understanding what he meant. The city was already traumatized enough, without knowing how close they were to an irreversible abyss. For the good of all, the secret would have to be buried along with the mine, along with the shadows that had been expelled from that place. And so, with the mine destroyed, the portal closed, and the city apparently safe, Isabel and Matthias began the long road back to normality. But the scars of the experience would never be erased. What Matthias had seen, what he had become, would not disappear from their memory. And somehow something was still with them. What was beyond the portal, what was released, was still waiting, watching, lurking, waiting for a new moment. As the months passed, the city began to return to its routine. People went on with their lives, not knowing exactly how much they had been spared. The case of the disappearances was finally closed, but the families would never forget what they had lost. The mystery of the Gouveas and the experiments of manipulating the children was buried, as if it had been erased from the city's history. And, although the mine was closed forever, there was always that feeling that something, some remnant of it all, still remained. Matthias went back to school, but his gaze was distant, always a little darker than that of the other children. He knew what had happened, and she knew that the truth could not be completely silenced. The fear that he carried with him was deeper than anything she could understand. Isabel, now with the weight of being a mother and protector, knew that her fight was not over. Her mission was to continue loving, to continue trying to rebuild Matthias's life, even when everything seemed against them, even when what he had seen on the other side of the portal seemed to haunt them, like a shadow that refuses to disappear. The city moved on, unaware that its future was always on the edge of darkness. And even with the apparent peace that now reigned, something in the depths was still waiting, a force that should never have been released. But for now, what remained was a sigh of relief, and the hope that love could overcome even the deepest terrors, because in the end, love was the only force capable of resisting everything. Even when everything seemed lost, love was still the key.